Okay, we're now going to look in a bit more detail at some of the finite bits of Tiger One. First thing, starting off on the left there, obviously then the track guards. Interesting thing about the Tiger One was that both the track guards, left and right, actually lifted up. Let's gain access there. And also you note that everything is hinged on the side. The reason being, of course, Tiger One had a transit track. So when it was to go on a railway, because of the width of some of the tunnels, you couldn't actually get it on there with the normal track on. So they put a transit track on there, and everything then hooked up, and the splash guards, etc., were removed to allow it to gain access. Another thing to note on there, you've got a eyelet. The reason for the eyelet was it just means that a lifting frame can be fitted in there. When the lifting frame's in there, there's a hook and weight on the end, and it means that they could assist when they're changing the sprockets on the track. Moving our way across to the right, first we come across, of course, is where the bow gunner stroke the radio operator, as they were one and the same person, actually was positioned inside. You can see on the outside there the mounting for the MG34. Interesting thing obviously about this was the movement wise it had 15 degrees of movement left and right, laterally, and also -10 to +20 degrees of movement in the vertical. Now obviously Tiger One, one of the things about Tiger One was it was capable of doing deep wading. However, records show that it never actually carried out any deep wading, but because of that it made it quite expensive as well, and the design process was on the outside there is a rim, and also you can see there's two eyelets there with butterfly screws. When it was preparing for deep wading, it just means that a cover could go on there, obviously to protect the bow mounting gunner there, and also prevent any ingress of water going in. Moving away across the right hand side, we now really come across to the driver's station. Armoured driver's hatch, which can be closed from the inside as well. A couple of interesting points. If you notice on the top there, you've got two weld marks. This was initially where the early version of Tiger One would have had the binocular type periscope fitted, but this was replaced later on in the design stage. And of course, finally, finishing off really with the other side, identical to the left hand side of the track, and again, elevating up or can be moved up as well. Okay, moving down the side of the Tiger then, you can see more clearly the track configuration, and again we've got the driver later on to give us a much more detailed thing on there. I already mentioned about the transit tracks. Just a point to note on the transit tracks is when they were fitted, all the outer road wheels were taken off, obviously to make it easier to fit. A couple of things to notice on here. On top you can see we've got a tow rope, and also, although not the original of course, you'd also have a track rope located on the side here as well. Moving our way back down, you can see very clearly there at the moment, a good position of it is the mantlet, which actually housed obviously the 88mm gun. Interesting point about this is we know this is one of the first 100 production models of this particular mantlet. The reason we know that is because it's got the cutaway portion in this side. The reason being, of course, at one stage when the Porsche thought he was going to actually have the contracts to produce all of the chassis, etc., for the Tiger One, produced these turrets because the raised engine decks at the rear on the Porsche variant meant it would snag unless it had a raised portion on there. So we know by that this was one of the first 100 production models. Now, of course, the thing that really made the Tiger One very distinctive and very impressive on the battlefield was the use of the 88mm. This was based on the anti-aircraft gun, the Flak 36, and actually Hitler himself insisted that the Flak 36 was mounted onto a tank chassis. This, of course, caused huge problems because the recoil was absolutely intensive. And what you will find in the Tiger One is use of a hydropneumatic buffer and a recuperator, very similar to what you get on modern main battle tanks. And we'll see that a bit later on when we get inside the turret. Again, another thing that made it very distinctive at the time was, of course, the armour protection. The armour protection made it almost, in the initial stages of the war, almost impervious to anything that the Allies could throw against it. And its thickest part, it is 100mm. It was using rolled homogeneous armour. Again, the rolling process actually made it toughened and made it stronger than anything else the Allies had at the time. And another thing, while we're talking about the recoil that's produced by the 88mm, also you find at the end of the barrel there, very distinctive, is the double baffle muzzle brake. The reason for this, of course, actually reduced almost 70% of the recoil that you'd find inside the turret. And actually it was that important that if it was damaged during a conflict or during operations, the crews were told not to fire the main armament. Okay, we're now going to start moving up onto the turret. Just a couple of things to point out here. Obviously, the crew positions we're going to have a look at in more detail later on. But as I'm looking down forwards at the tank now, the right-hand side, you've got where the bow gunner radio operator actually sat. Very simple hatches, and he also had his own periscope fitted there as well. Notice the rubber seals you've got all the way around. Working our way across towards where the driver's position is, you've got a jacking block, various tool stowage positions, and you've also got a breather there for ventilation. And finishing across the left-hand side there, we've got the driver's hatch. Again, we're going to have a look at that.
抖音